that looks like some delicious bacon. Can't wait to have some after this video. Falls brand bacon, people, that's where it's at. Always consistent, delicious. Welcome to Bacon and Bezels, episode 2. Today we're going to look at the history of watches and why watches still matter. I know in my first video I kind of touched on it, but I want to go deeper today into the history of watches and why I'm so enamored by them and what makes them so special. Now, first we're going to do a little wristwatch check. And this watch that I'm wearing today is a Tissot, and I got it on my last birthday. My wife got it for me. You see that sweep of the second hands. It's an automatic watch. Behind it, it has the rotor there that controls it by movement. It's a really cool watch, Swiss made. And this just goes to show you, and I'll talk about in later videos, that you don't have to spend a ton of money to get a really nice watch. And in today's market where these watches are going crazy, and I know some of you watching aren't going to know the watch market very well, but it's a very niche thing, but these watches are going for insane prices. Vintage Rolex and Patek Philippe and Audemars Piguet are going for crazy money. And I know it can be stressful, and people thinking about getting into watch hobby can say, I don't have a ton of money. How am I supposed to ever get a nice watch? I'm not even going to bother. And they don't even think about it. But getting a nice watch is very accessible. There's tons of great watch brands out there like this Tissot for under $1,000 that are great watches. And I just implore you to, seek out these watches. And that's the funnest part about this hobby, is the hunt. What's the next watch I'm going to get? What can I get for a good value? And there's so many great brands out there. And I want to look more today about the history of watches, why watches still matter. I know I kind of went over that in the last video, but I touched on it, but I didn't go into the thick of it. So I want to look into that today. And the history of watches is extremely exciting and extremely interesting. Horology, the study of time, has been around for a long time, ever since, ancient Egyptians started telling time with sundials and with water clocks. But it didn't, the wristwatch, the modern day wristwatch that we have today, didn't really come along until, World War II. And the reason for that was because these soldiers needed a way, other than a pocket watch that they had to take out of their pocket. They had these lanyards to tell the time, and they needed a way to look at their watch at a glance, and the wristwatch came along. Before then, it was looked at as extremely feminine to wear a wristwatch. But that all changed with World War II and with the need to look at a watch at a glance, and they were given these wristwatches in the war. And even more so, the chronograph watch was an important part of watch history and of the war. They needed a way to time when the artillery from the other trench was coming at them, when these bombs were coming. These guys were in the trench. They saw on the other side that it was coming. They needed a way to time it so they could duck, they could take cover. And the way to do that was the chronograph. This is a Seiko that my wife got me. It's a really cool chronograph watch. Now the chronograph, as you see on these two buttons here, if you press the top here, you can see that orange second hand moving. And then when you stop it, you can see how much time has elapsed. So right there, it looks like 43 seconds. So what they did was they timed how long it took for the other trench to send their artillery, and they knew how many seconds it was, so they could duck and cover or throw other artillery their way. And after that, after World War II, and after that amazing complication of watches that they had, it really took off. And in the early 1900s, Louis Cartier, who is well known now in watch circles, with the Cartier brand, which I really want a Cartier watch someday. It's such a beautiful brand. He made a watch for this pilot with the last name of Santos, which is now the Cartier Santos watch. He made a watch for this pilot so he'd be able to glance at his watch and tell the time and tell what he needed, how long the distance was for the fuel that he needed in his plane. And after that, it just took off. And with that in mind, it's really cool to think about the function of these watches and the history that they have. And even today, there are still these workshops in Switzerland of these people who are painstakingly and tediously making these watches piece by piece, hundreds of pieces in these watches. And there's assembly lines of these people making little tiny pieces. And it's amazing how these watches can go with just man-made mechanical reasons. And that's what I really love about watches, is that they're not practical anymore, but there's still people who are putting in the time, who are making these watches so they're the best that they can be, and they're, painstakingly going through all these pieces of mechanics to make the best watch. And watches are art. Now, when I say that, what I mean is art is not necessary. Art is just what's around us. People make art, they paint mountains, they paint landscapes, they paint objects. We have that all around us. We don't need it. But the reason that art is great is art conjures emotions. Art makes us feel. Art makes us think. Art makes us imagine. And that's what watches are. Watches are art. We don't need them, but they're still great, because when we look at the face of a watch, we imagine what went into making it. What was that watchmaker thinking? There's so many complications that I'll get into. Perpetual calendars, there's date versions, there's so many different types of watches, and there's so many types of art. And that's what it means. That's why it matters, is that it's handmade, it's man-made, it's something that people put their heart and soul into, just like art. And when you look at a piece of art and what it makes you feel and what it makes you imagine that could be, when we look around us, we see what is, but when we look at art, we see what could be. And that's what watches are. Watches are a functional piece of material that we can look at, and they're just so fun to collect because there's so many different types. And I just want to implore you to find the beauty in things like watches and art. And as we look in my collection, as we look in the watches that I have, they're objects, they're worth money, but the reason I love them is because I can see somebody went into research and development, somebody, thought this out, and I love the mechanics behind it. I love that everything is working together. I love that it's a piece of art on my wrist. And in this world of consumer electronics and a world where everybody has something on their wrist that looks exactly alike, and in a world of little personality where everything is the same, a watch really shows your personality, and that's what I love. When I look in the collecting world, one person isn't going to like what another person likes. You may choose a watch that's completely different from me, but I see the merit in it. I see the beauty in it. I see what you see. And that's why watches are really cool, is that they're so unique. And what I like might not be what you like, but I can see why you like it. And I think that's what we really need to explore in this channel more, is watches as art. And I appreciate you watching this. Please subscribe. Please like this video. I really love doing this. I want to keep doing it. And I thank you for watching this video.